Welcome to a very special Halloween edition of Nolan Knows. I'm your host, Scary Gary Nolan. Come, join me as we discuss the dark and stormy lightning round. Topic number one, or should I say victim number one? Jose Canseco blew his middle finger off while cleaning his gun. So Jose Canseco, let me give you a little tip about guns. They're always loaded. Never, ever assume that your firearm is anything but loaded. Treat it like there's a round in the chamber. That way you'll have the other 9 digits to play with later on. All right, victim number 2. A 19-year-old Chinese student is sparking outrage by offering sex to different men in each city as she tours the country backpacking. She expects them to pay the cost. Well, that's kind of like prostitution and everybody's upset. But you know what? We're all, to a certain extent, prostitutes, aren't we? Isn't this group using my body, the dulcet tones of my voice, and this pretty face to make money? I'm prostituting myself. It's no big deal. All right, next victim is one Nurse Casey Hickox. She's going to court. Actually, she's gone to court because the state of Maine wanted to quarantine her. She was working with Ebola patients. Interesting, I saw her on her bicycle ride. She was wearing a helmet. So to protect herself, she decided an ounce of prevention was worth a pound of cure. But for those fellow residents of the state of Maine, she's not so anxious for that ounce of prevention. Little cognitive dissonance there. Next victim, Avengers Infinity War. Many others, by the way, from the Marvel stables are going to be making movies. These are great. They're great. They're even fun and escapist for adults as well as children. Generally, you see the good guy triumph over the bad guy. Good message, should be fun. The next victim is New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. He was arguing with a heckler about Sandy. You know, I like his style. I really do. I like that aggressive style. But I'm not really crazy about a lot of the things he stands for. He's entertaining. He seems to say what he means. I like that in a politician. I just wish he was just a little bit more libertarian in his beliefs. The CEO from Apple, Tim Cook, came out, said he's proud to be gay. You know what? I don't care. Everybody that wants to can come out. I don't care who you sleep with. It's not news. Our next victim, Ann Romney, she is upset because a Democrat managed to throw a slur in by accident. He was saying about his Republican opponent to get her out, and he said whore out by accident. Ann Romney is having a fit and apoplexy about it. Look, it was an accident. He chuckled because the crowd chuckled. Move along, not important. The next victim, San Francisco. Why? Because the Giants managed to win the World Series. And they celebrated. Oh, did they celebrate. They burned cars and turned them over and threw bottles and rocks and stones. They had a riot. It's not my idea of how to celebrate. I think it's pretty damned expensive, pretty damned foolish, and I certainly hope every one of them gets punished. In a new Fox News poll, the economy remains a key issue for candidates and voters despite all the foreign crises. It's no wonder we've been sort of bumping along the bottom with this economy. It isn't translating. People aren't seeing real returns in their income. Actually, family income has gone up, but that's because we now have more two-family workers, two-income families, if you will. The reason people are concerned about the economy is because it really hasn't recovered. The media is full of ghoulish people who forgot to cover the important stories, but don't fret. Come sit by the fire and let me tell you a story about another reason why we should abolish the income tax and the IRS, civil asset forfeiture. There was a story in the news about a woman who owns a restaurant, cash only. She makes cash deposits, as you might imagine, at the bank. Well, there is a rule that says if you deposit more than $10,000 at a time, the bank has to notify the IRS. So she wasn't hitting that threshold. She was way below that threshold. But it didn't make a difference because there's also a law that says you can't do that either. You see, if they call it structuring, you're putting money in less than $10,000 increments, the IRS thinks you're trying to circumvent the $10,000 law, so they come after you anyway. The long and short of it is, this 80-year-old woman who's had this restaurant for 60 years or something along those lines had all of her money seized by the Internal Revenue Service for allegedly structuring. She wasn't selling drugs, she wasn't laundering money, she was just engaged in a cash business. She's not alone, other businesses go through this as well. The problem here is the IRS is so omnipotent that they're able to reach into her bank account and yours and take everything, and they don't have to prove you've done anything wrong. You're guilty until proven innocent. Now here's the real dirty side of this story. When you contact your attorney and find out what it costs to fight to get your money back, it's usually not worth it to go get your money back. It's just a great way to seize assets, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Now, the government does this in other ways too. It's not just in structuring, it's not just in that $10,000 limit. Suppose you own a piece of rental property and your tenant starts selling drugs. The government can seize the house. It's called asset forfeiture because it's an ill-gotten gain. They allege it's something used to sell drugs. They can take it. They don't have to go to court. They don't have to prove you knew anything. They don't have to prove you did anything wrong. The house, the rental house, becomes their property, and it's instantly guilty until you prove it's innocent. They do this with cars. They did it with a guy who was driving down to South Carolina a couple of years ago to buy a car. He had cash in the car with him. The highway patrol stopped him. They asked him if he had any cash in the car. He foolishly answered. They seized the money and they said it's probably drug money, and it was only like $7,000. So the net result was it wasn't worth it for him to fight it. It would have cost him more money to get $7,000 back. Why bother? Instantly, they profit. Local police use asset forfeiture. State police use civil asset forfeiture, and so does the federal government. It's just a way to rip you off. What we really need is smaller government, and we need them to say, you're guilty before we can seize your asset. You're innocent until proven guilty. Get rid of the IRS. Get rid of civil asset forfeiture. And that was missed in the media. The producers, fearing I might have an ounce of dignity left, insist that I do one more segment. The government is full of vampires. They suck the money right out from under us. Beware, they may strike you next. Their most recent hit, the federal government made $20 billion in secret purchases in recent months. Here's how it works. The federal government gives employees of the federal government, and an awful lot of them I might add, a credit card with $3,000 on it, and they go out and spend it. They spend thousands of dollars at Starbucks. You know, what's really fascinating about the story is what we don't know. You see, the investigative reporters that dug this up tried to get information from all of the different departments of the federal government. We're talking about Environmental Protection Agency and Homeland Security and all the rest of them, to find out what they spent the money on. But you know what? They wouldn't tell them. It's a secret. I suppose after the $20,000 in Starbucks coffee deal, they probably wanted to keep it that way. The fact is, it's easy to spend money that you haven't earned. It's easy to spend money when you can demand it from other people. And that's what the federal government has done. And they had the hubris, the audacity to not tell the media what they spent that money on. Now here's what's ironic. Any one of you who has an expense account, try this with your boss. Because after all, they work for us. So imagine that you get an expense account from your boss and you hand him a bill for $3,000, or $20 billion in this case, and when your boss says, well, what did you spend that money on? You tell him, I'm not telling. It's a secret. You'll be walking down the street counting your change before you know what hit you. The federal government needs to shrink. The tax dollars they take need to shrink. And they need to be accountable. Most of all, they need to be accountable, and they're not. We can change that. We can change that when we vote. We need to start finding responsible candidates who will hold these departments in check.